Her words hit me like a physical blow. Pretend that my life wasn't a complete and utter sham. The audacity was breathtaking. But beneath the anger, a spark of something else ignited. My name is Juliet Vance, and until very recently, I was a prisoner in a palace of silk and lies. 28 years old, and feeling every single day of it. I suppose on the surface, my life looked enviable. A sprawling estate nestled in the Virginia countryside, designer clothes that filled walk-in closets the size of small apartments, and a husband who, at least in photographs, appeared devastatingly handsome. But the reality was a gilded cage, and I was the songbird whose wings had been clipped. Theo, my husband, possessed the charm of a seasoned conman and the emotional depth of a puddle. He was handsome, yes, but his good looks masked a hollow core. Every smile felt calculated, every kind word a carefully constructed manipulation. And then there was Margot, his mother. A woman carved from ice and draped in diamonds. She was the puppet master, Theo her willing marionette. Together, they control every aspect of my life, especially the purse strings. It wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly a significant part of it. Every purchase, every outing, every single expense was scrutinized, judged, and often denied. I had to submit requests for even the most basic necessities, enduring Margot's condescending lectures about fiscal responsibility and my supposed lack thereof. I felt like a child, constantly begging for permission, constantly reminded of my dependence. The control extended beyond finances. My friends were deemed unsuitable, my hobbies frivolous, my opinions irrelevant. They wanted me to be a beautiful, silent ornament, a showpiece to reflect their success and status. They had carefully curated my existence, trimming away anything that threatened their carefully constructed image of perfection. I tried to fight back, at first. Small acts of rebellion, subtle defiance. But each attempt was met with swift and merciless retribution. A pointed remark here, a cancelled credit card there, a veiled threat about my family's financial well-being. Slowly, I learned to keep my head down, to play the part of the dutiful wife, the grateful recipient of their generosity. But beneath the surface, a quiet desperation began to simmer. A slow-burning resentment that threatened to consume me. I started to document everything. Every cruel word, every manipulative tactic, every instance of financial control. I knew, deep down, that I needed to escape, but I also knew that I couldn't leave empty-handed. I needed leverage. I needed a plan. And then Theo's affair came to light, a messy, public spectacle that threatened to shatter their carefully constructed facade. I should have been devastated, heartbroken. But all I felt was a cold, calculating sense of opportunity. The affair itself was almost comical in its predictability. Theo, predictably, had fallen for a younger woman. Lila was her name, and she possessed the kind of brazen confidence that Theo found irresistible. She was everything I wasn't, loud, assertive, and unapologetically ambitious. She worked as an interior designer, often pitching her ideas, that is to say, my ideas, to Theo when he was reviewing projects for his real estate company. I had, in my naivete, initially welcomed Lila, thinking she might be a friend, someone to alleviate the soul-crushing boredom of my days. How wrong I was. The whisper started subtly, a stolen glance here, a lingering touch there. Then came the late nights at the office, the business trips that stretched on for days. I knew, of course. I wasn't blind. But I pretended not to see, not to know. Partly because I was afraid, partly because I was biding my time. Gathering my strength, preparing my plan. The real blow came when Lila announced she was pregnant. Theo, predictably, was ecstatic. He paraded her around like a prize, oblivious to the whispers and sideways glances. He spoke of fatherhood, of building a family, as if I didn't exist, as if the past 5 years of our marriage had been a figment of my imagination. But the most galling part of it all was Margot's reaction. I had expected outrage, perhaps even a bit of sympathy. Instead, she summoned me to her study, a room filled with antique furniture and the scent of expensive perfume, and delivered her verdict with the cold detachment of a seasoned judge. "Be gracious, Juliet," she said, her voice as sharp as shards of glass. "These things happen. You are a Vance, and Vances do not air their dirty laundry in public. You will accept this child as Theo's, and you will support him in every way. It is your duty." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Be gracious. Accept this humiliation? Pretend that my life wasn't a complete and utter sham. The audacity was breathtaking. But beneath the anger, a spark of something else ignited. A fierce, unyielding determination. I would be gracious, Margot. I would play the part of the dutiful wife, the supportive partner. But I would do it on my own terms. I would use their expectations against them. I would turn their arrogance into their downfall. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring out at the manicured lawns and perfectly sculpted gardens. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows across the room. And in the silence, I made a vow. They had mistaken my quiet desperation for weakness. They would soon learn just how wrong they were. They would soon hear the ice forming in my vows. And they would regret the day they ever crossed Juliet Vance. I began to formulate my plans with meticulous detail. Each step carefully calculated, each move designed to inflict maximum damage. I would be gracious, all right. Graciously leading them to their destruction. But the affair, the pregnancy, Margot's icy pronouncements, all of that was just a prelude to the real horror. The truly twisted, Shakespearean tragedy that lay at the heart of this whole sordid mess. It wasn't enough that Theo was cheating on me. It wasn't enough that he was bringing a child into the world out of wedlock. No, the universe, in its infinite cruelty, had decided to add one final, devastating twist. The baby wasn't Theo's. I discovered this by accident, of course. A misplaced document, a whispered phone call overheard in the dead of night. The details are irrelevant. What matters is the truth, the ugly, horrifying truth that Margot had desperately tried to conceal for years. Lila was Margot's daughter. Years ago, before she married into the Vance family and ascended to her throne of wealth and power, Margot had had an affair. A brief, passionate indiscretion that resulted in a pregnancy. But a child out of wedlock would have been a stain on her carefully crafted image, a barrier to her ambitions. So, she had given the baby up for adoption, ensuring that the child would be raised far away from her gilded world. Or so she thought. Fate, it seems, had a different plan. Lila, driven by an insatiable ambition and a thirst for recognition, had somehow tracked down her birth mother. Margot, perhaps out of guilt or a twisted sense of maternal obligation, had taken Lila under her wing, introducing her to Theo and subtly manipulating events to bring them together. Theo was sleeping with his half-sister. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the last vestiges of my composure. I sank to my knees, gasping for air, struggling to comprehend the sheer magnitude of the depravity. It was beyond anything I could have imagined, a grotesque parody of a soap opera, a nightmare come to life. But even in my shock and horror, a strange sense of clarity emerged. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a crime. A sin of biblical proportions. And it gave me the weapon I needed. The ammunition to destroy them all. Margot had tried to bury her past, to keep her secrets hidden. But I was going to drag them into the light, expose them for the monsters they truly were. I would use their own twisted desires against them, turning their carefully constructed world into a smoking ruin. The pieces were falling into place. The plan was taking shape. And I, Juliet Vance, the quiet, obedient wife, was about to unleash a storm of vengeance that would leave them begging for mercy. Mercy they would not receive. The knowledge of Lila's true parentage was the final, crucial element. Now, I knew exactly how to sink their ship. With the truth firmly in my grasp, the gears of my plan began to spin with a newfound urgency. I needed to act quickly, before Margot had a chance to cover her tracks, before Theo could further entrench himself in his delusional fantasy of fatherhood. I needed to orchestrate their downfall, and I needed to do it with precision and ruthlessness. The first step was to appear as though I had accepted the situation, to lull them into a false sense of security. I showered Theo with affection, praising his commitment to Lila and the baby. I even offered to help plan the baby moon, suggesting a luxurious cruise to a remote island paradise. Margot, predictably, was suspicious. She watched me with narrowed eyes, her gaze as sharp and penetrating as ever. But I played my part perfectly, radiating an air of serene acceptance that even she couldn't penetrate. I knew she wanted to believe that I had finally succumbed to their control, that I was resigned to my fate as the wronged wife. And so, I let her believe it. The cruise was my masterpiece, a carefully crafted trap designed to ensnare them both. I spent weeks researching destinations, poring over brochures, and consulting with travel agents. I chose a secluded island in the Caribbean, a place of breathtaking beauty and deceptive tranquility. The perfect backdrop for a tragedy. I booked them the most luxurious suite on the ship, complete with a private balcony and a personal butler. I arranged for champagne and flowers to be delivered to their cabin upon arrival. I even purchased a selection of baby gifts, carefully chosen to appeal to Theo's newfound paternal instincts. Every detail was meticulously planned, every contingency accounted for. I paid for everything in cash, ensuring that there would be no paper trail, no connection to me. I used a burner phone to communicate with the travel agent, disguising my voice and paying extra to ensure complete anonymity. I knew that I was walking a dangerous line, that one wrong move could expose my plan and ruin everything. But I was driven by a burning desire for revenge, a need to see them pay for the pain and humiliation they had inflicted upon me. As I finalized the arrangements for the cruise, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. They thought they had won, that they had finally broken me. But they were wrong. I was about to unleash a storm of vengeance that would shatter their carefully constructed world, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of their own lies. The tickets were purchased. The reservations were confirmed. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. And I, Juliet Vance, was ready to watch them fall. The Serenity, a gleaming white behemoth of a cruise ship, sliced through the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea. Sunlight danced on the waves, creating a dazzling display of light and color. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, their fronds rustling like whispered secrets. The air was thick with the scent of salt and sunscreen, a heady mix that promised relaxation and escape. But beneath the idyllic surface, a storm was brewing. Theo and Lila, oblivious to the danger that awaited them, reveled in their newfound paradise. They lounged by the pool, sipping cocktails with little umbrellas and basking in the attention of the ship's crew. They strolled hand in hand along the deck, gazing out at the endless horizon. They were the picture of happiness, a couple in love, embarking on a new chapter of their lives. Lila, in particular, seemed to be thriving. The sea air had given her skin a healthy glow, and her pregnancy had softened her features, adding a touch of vulnerability to her usual brash demeanor. She spent hours shopping in the ship's boutiques, purchasing designer clothes and expensive jewelry. She was determined to make the most of her baby moon, to solidify her position as Theo's future wife and the mother of his child. Theo, for his part, seemed content to indulge her every whim. He showered her with compliments and gifts, eager to prove his devotion. He was finally free from the constraints of his marriage to me, free to embrace his true feelings for Lila. Or so he thought. They dined in the ship's elegant restaurants, savoring gourmet meals and fine wines. They danced the night away in the ship's nightclub, lost in each other's arms. They were living a fairy tale, a dream come true. But every fairy tale has its dark side, and this one was about to take a decidedly sinister turn. Unbeknownst to Theo and Lila, their every move was being watched. The ship's captain, a stern-faced woman with years of experience navigating treacherous waters, had received a sealed envelope from me before they even boarded the ship. Inside were the paternity results, irrefutable proof that Theo was not the father of Lila's child. And a detailed account of Margot's dark secret, the truth about Lila's parentage. The captain, a woman of impeccable integrity and unwavering moral compass, was appalled by what she read. She immediately contacted Interpol, providing them with all the information I had given her. She was ready to assist in any way possible to bring these criminals to justice. The Serenity was no longer just a cruise ship. It was a floating prison, carrying its unsuspecting passengers towards their inevitable doom. The beauty of the Caribbean Sea concealed a web of deceit and betrayal, a deadly game of cat and mouse that was about to reach its shocking conclusion. The baby moon was about to become a nightmare. And I, Juliet Vance, was about to make sure they never forgot it. The paternity test. It was a crucial piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable evidence that would shatter Theo's carefully constructed reality and expose Lila's lies. I had arranged for it months ago, shortly after Lila announced her pregnancy. I knew, deep down, that Theo couldn't possibly be the father. His arrogance and self-absorption made him blind to the obvious, but I wasn't. I had discreetly collected a sample of Theo's DNA, a stray hair from his comb, a discarded coffee cup. I sent it to a private lab, along with a sample I had obtained from Lila, disguised as a routine prenatal screening. The results were conclusive: Theo was not the father. But I didn't want to simply confront them with the truth. I wanted to make them suffer, to watch their world crumble around them. That's why I waited, patiently biding my time until the cruise. The sealed envelope I entrusted to Captain Eva Rostova contained not only the paternity test results but also a detailed affidavit outlining Margot's past indiscretion and Lila's true parentage. I had spent weeks compiling the evidence, piecing together fragments of information from old newspaper articles, confidential medical records, and whispered conversations. It was a damning indictment, a meticulously documented account of their lies and deceit. I knew that Captain Rostova, a woman of unwavering integrity and a reputation for upholding the law, would not hesitate to act once she had seen the evidence. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had dedicated her life to justice. I trusted her implicitly to carry out my plan. Before the ship had even left port, Captain Rostova had discreetly reviewed the contents of the envelope. Her face had hardened as she read the damning evidence, her eyes flashing with anger and disgust. She immediately contacted Interpol, providing them with all the necessary information to apprehend Theo and Lila upon their return to port. But I didn't want them to simply be arrested. I wanted them to face the full consequences of their actions. I wanted them to be exposed, humiliated, and ostracized by everyone they knew. That's why I had included a detailed press release in the envelope, outlining the entire sordid affair, from Theo's infidelity to Margot's dark secret. I instructed Captain Rostova to release the press release to the media once the ship was within international waters, ensuring that the story would be splashed across headlines around the world before Theo and Lila even had a chance to disembark. I wanted them to be paraded through the streets in handcuffs, their faces plastered on every television screen and newspaper. I wanted them to be judged by their peers, condemned by society, and forever branded as the monsters they truly were. The paternity test was just the beginning. It was the spark that would ignite the inferno, the catalyst that would unleash my carefully orchestrated revenge. And I, Juliet Vance, was ready to watch them burn. The charges against them were numerous and severe. Bigamy, for starters. Theo was still legally married to me when he impregnated Lila and made plans to start a new life with her. That alone carried a hefty prison sentence. But the incestuous nature of their relationship took things to a whole new level. Sleeping with your half-sister was not only morally reprehensible but also a serious crime in most jurisdictions. The penalties for incest ranged from lengthy prison terms to lifetime bans from ever being around children. And then there was Margot's role in all of this. She had knowingly concealed Lila's true parentage, facilitating the incestuous relationship and actively encouraging Theo to pursue it. She could be charged with conspiracy, aiding and abetting, and a host of other offenses. But the legal ramifications were only part of the equation. The social consequences would be even more devastating. The Vance family, once revered for their wealth and status, would be forever tainted by scandal. Their reputation would be in tatters, their business empire in ruins. Theo would lose everything: his money, his friends, his family. He would be a pariah, shunned by society and reviled by all who knew him. Lila would face similar consequences. She would be stripped of her designer clothes, her expensive jewelry, and her newfound sense of importance. She would be exposed as a fraud, a con artist, and a homewrecker. Margot, the puppet master, would finally lose control. Her carefully constructed world would come crashing down around her, leaving her isolated and alone. She would be forced to confront the consequences of her actions, to face the reality of her twisted and depraved life. I had made sure that the evidence against them was irrefutable, that there would be no way for them to escape justice. I had meticulously documented every detail of their crimes, gathering evidence from every possible source. I had left no stone unturned, no avenue unexplored. I had also made sure that the authorities were fully aware of the potential for flight. I had provided them with detailed information about Theo's assets, his offshore accounts, and his travel plans. I had warned them that he was likely to attempt to flee the country once he realized the gravity of the situation. That's why I had insisted that Interpol be involved from the very beginning. They had the resources and the expertise to track down Theo and Lila, no matter where they tried to hide. They would be apprehended, extradited, and brought to justice. My plan was foolproof. Every detail had been carefully considered, every contingency accounted for. There was no way for them to escape. They were trapped, cornered, and about to face the full force of my revenge. Bigamy and incest sink ships, indeed. And the Serenity was about to become their watery grave. At least, figuratively speaking. Back in Virginia, miles away from the turquoise waters and deceptive tranquility of the Caribbean, I sat alone in my study, the same room where Margot had so coldly instructed me to be gracious. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the room, illuminating the meticulously organized files that contained all the evidence of their crimes. I raised a glass of champagne, the finest vintage, a gift from Theo that I had always refused to drink. Tonight, however, it felt appropriate. A toast to their downfall, to the culmination of my carefully orchestrated revenge. The news reports would be breaking any minute now. Captain Rostova, true to her word, had released a press release as soon as the Serenity had crossed into international waters. The story was already spreading like wildfire across the internet, dominating social media feeds and trending on every major news website. I could almost picture their faces when they found out. Theo, his smart grin replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Lila, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before her very eyes. Margot, her icy composure finally cracking under the weight of her own depravity. They had mistaken my quiet desperation for weakness. They had assumed that I would simply accept their betrayal, that I would meekly fade into the background and allow them to continue their twisted charade. They were wrong. I had endured their cruelty, their manipulation, and their control for far too long. I had suffered in silence, biding my time, gathering my strength, and plotting my revenge. And now, the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. I took a sip of champagne, savoring the sweet, effervescent liquid as it trickled down my throat. A faint smile played on my lips. They should have heard the ice forming in my vows. They should have sensed the storm brewing beneath the surface. They should have known that I was not someone to be trifled with. But they didn't. And now, they were about to pay the price. The phone rang, shattering the silence. It was my lawyer, calling to inform me that Interpol had already intercepted the Serenity and taken Theo and Lila into custody. Margot had been arrested at her home, just moments before she could attempt to flee the country. Justice had been served. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of profound satisfaction wash over me. The years of pain and humiliation had finally come to an end. I was free. I walked over to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. The world seemed brighter, clearer, more vibrant than I had ever remembered it. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. The ice had finally melted. And the sun was finally shining. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The media frenzy was relentless, the Vance family name dragged through the mud. Their carefully constructed empire crumbled before my eyes, just as I had envisioned. Theo and Lila, stripped of their illusions and exposed for their deceit, faced the full weight of the law. Margot, her icy facade shattered, was left to confront the wreckage of her own making. On the other hand, emerged from the ashes, reborn. The quiet, obedient wife was gone, replaced by a woman of strength, resilience, and unwavering determination. I had faced my demons and emerged victorious. The divorce was swift and uncomplicated. Theo, desperate to salvage what little remained of his reputation, offered me a generous settlement. I accepted, not because I needed the money, but because I deserved it. It was a small price for them to pay for the years of pain and humiliation they had inflicted upon me. I used the settlement to start a foundation, dedicated to helping women who were trapped in abusive relationships. I wanted to empower them, to give them the resources and support they needed to escape their own gilded cages. I wanted to show them that they were not alone, that there was hope for a better future. I also wrote a book, detailing my experiences and sharing my story of survival. It became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages and inspiring women all over the world. I became a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of hope for the oppressed. Margot, in a desperate attempt to regain control, tried to discredit me, to paint me as a vengeful and manipulative woman. But her efforts were futile. The truth had already been revealed, and no amount of spin could change that. She was left to fade into obscurity, a cautionary tale of greed, power, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. As for Theo, he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. He lost everything, his freedom, his family, and his reputation. He was a broken man, haunted by the ghosts of his past. I never visited him in prison. I had no desire to gloat or to seek closure. He was simply irrelevant to me. He was a chapter in my life that had been closed, a mistake that I had learned from. I moved on, embracing my newfound freedom and dedicating my life to helping others. I traveled the world, speaking at conferences, meeting with activists, and advocating for women's rights. I found love again, a man who respected me, valued me, and cherished me for who I was. We built a life together, filled with laughter, joy, and mutual support. Looking back on those dark days, I can honestly say that I have no regrets. I did what I had to do to survive, to protect myself, and to reclaim my life. They mistook my quiet desperation for weakness. They should have heard the ice forming in my vows. But they didn't. And I, Juliet Vance, lived happily ever after. A survivor, a warrior, and a testament to the power of the human spirit.
Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.